Great. So hello, everybody, and welcome. As I'm sure you may know, I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner of Douglas Jackson. And in today's episode of the Impact Room, I'm delighted to be joined by Clare Muscutt. Clare is a customer experience entrepreneur, an experienced award-winning CX leader, as well as an independent consultant now, a keynote speaker and strategic problem solver. Clare has a background that includes some of the best-known brands and experiences from across the marketing, retail, hospitality, and tech space. Clare is also the founder and CEO of WiCX, the world's first membership community for women in customer experience and technology. In line with her drive to really make a difference to the world around her, WiCX is a vibrant, growing, inclusive global platform which helps raise up both the women within the community and their voices across the CX and technology world. Hello, Clare.
Hello, how are you?
I'm really well. Thanks for joining me here. I'm really interested to sort of get into this and excited to hear from you. Are you ready to get started?
Born ready.
Fab. So, there's so much we can talk about today, but I'll focus on the three areas, that intersection of CX, leadership, tech, and of course, the women in CX part. So if we start in customer experience, and especially from that technology standpoint, I know you've spoken about this in the past, but CX transformation is the problem, not the solution. So can you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, it was actually a chapter of a book I wrote in 2020, saying customer experience transformation is the problem, not the solution. And what I was positing was that at that time, this report had come out that said over 70% of transformations fail. And in 2024, we've still got exactly the same statistic. 70% of digital transformations still fail. So what I was talking about in that was that, it seems like really bold, aspirational and sexy. This transformation word gets bandied around with everything, whether it's digital, operational, cultural and customer experience transformation specifically. But in reality, those kinds of large scale episodic changes very rarely work. Yeah. So, you look to incredible examples like Apple's metamorphosis under Steve Jobs, but that's so famous because it's so exceedingly rare, not because it's easy to do, but for some reason, the psyche of the business world has been led to believe that transformation is the solution to everything, and it isn't. And the reason I said it wasn't was because the timescales, complexity, and the leadership involved in making something like that happen. So from a timescales point of view, the longer something takes, the more likely the goalposts are to have moved. And with technology being the dominant force that it is, that particularly for customers, their expectations and what they expect of businesses is constantly evolving. So if you've got something that's going to take you 5 years, by the time you get there, probably wasn't the thing that people now would want anyway. Yeah. From a complexity point of view, the bigger changes that we propose, the more resistance that we're going to face, particularly from an employee point of view. So again, it's so disruptive to try to do these transformational activities. I think that's again another negative. And and again, from a leadership point of view, not everybody is a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos, right? In a customer-centered CEO leader who's actively trying to promote and champion the kinds of initiatives that have changed the world. So what you end up with is these very kind of lackluster, often eventually cost-driven exercises that actually reduce the value of the proposition. So so I was saying that there must be a better way, and I was just talking about, for example, like lean over large programs, doing things that you can get to market quickly, test, learn, iterate, move forward, based on a solid understanding of customer needs. And that was talking about empowerment being better than procedure. So a lot of organizations have these incredibly bureaucratic governance structures that it takes forever to get anything approved. But being able to empower teams, people to react to and respond to, particularly customer challenges, being a more positive thing. Yeah. And really got into the aspect of what I'm sure we'll talk about later, like customer experience design and innovation being critical, as opposed to kind of like top-down technology roadmap led changes that quite often end up just digitizing what we already do. So Yeah, there were a number of reasons. And then, as I said, wrote a chapter in a book on it in 2020, and I'm still talking about it now. So
well, it's very irrelevant, isn't it? And as you say, no movement whatsoever. And what, just, I should have put it in the title and the introduction, but what's the title of your book, just for anybody that's obviously interested?
It wasn't my book, it was someone else's book.
I
just wrote a chapter in it.
Oh, well, fair enough then. Okay. And it sounds to me, I mean, we see this so often, don't we? I mean, it's even when companies are saying, they're customer obsessed or they're employee obsessed, or, like you say, large scale transformation, this obsession point, it is so difficult to do. Why are businesses a lot more, I don't know, why aren't they more honest with themselves and with the people, and, like, as you say, maybe bite off smaller chunks of the the pie, and do these critical small continuous improvements and actually get further along the journey, rather than these big bold statements, which actually, I think it's links back. I mean, you tell me, the purpose, the values, the vision, it's just not there, is it? And then they just grab hold of these things and think it's the right thing to do. But is that what you think, where it all sort of falls down right at the start of the process, basically?
There's a few bits to unpick there. So I think there's like a massive underestimation of the compound effect of a number of small but critical changes, particularly when it comes to customer experience, that can have a significantly greater impact at a significantly faster pace than something that's more long-term and strategic. I think for businesses, it's common that in a vision statement, it will be written on a wall, something along the line of customers are at the heart of everything. But again, saying that and doing it are two completely different things. So I think with my clients or businesses that I've worked with, being able to say, okay, we're saying this, but where's the evidence in our systems, our processes, the way that we do business, being able to hold the mirror up to reflect that what we say about ourselves and what our customers or employees actually experience from us can be very different. But I think there's maybe just a bit of a naivety from leadership about what it really means and what it really takes. If you've not got a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos, I think like vision and values are incredibly important, but action is more important. And being able to see the gap between who we say we are or who we think we are, because actually a lot of businesses think that they are customer oriented or people oriented, and what the end outcome is, not for the business but for the people who receive the service or are employed there, can quite often be very different. So
excellent points, thank you. So what do you, or how do you see the future of CX and customer experience? I mean, there are now more CX experts than ever, and leaders than ever before, but that meant as well, or we've seen over the last few years, haven't we, the disruptions, reorgs, and even some redundancies around CX. So I mean, what do you see coming down the road for the CX function?
This is another big one to unpick. So I think what we saw was this belief that if we put someone on the board that has customer experience in their job title, then that's going to resolve everything. And the reality is it didn't. So I think that kind of like CXO type role we're seeing less and less of because of its ineffectiveness. I think I said this before, but if you have a customer oriented COO and CX people reporting into them, one of the biggest challenges CX people, leaders, teams, whatever, face is that they have no kind of direct authority to implement any of the changes. So being as close to the power core of being able to enact change is fundamentally really important, and it's going to become increasingly important. I think customer experience historically has been very much focused on what I'm going to quote John Sills here is the thin end of the wedge when it comes to customer insight and understanding. So skills that are around voice of customer, writing reports, measuring things, and again, not doing anything about it, and the resource being allocated to measuring and reporting, not actually changing anything. And I think you'll probably be seeing this with job descriptions for leaders, that actually the recognition that we need to be at this thick end of the wedge, which is customer genuine understanding and being able to respond with customer experience design and innovation in an ever evolving very often complex operating environment. So I think the skill set is shifting hugely, and to be a successful CX leader now, it's great to have technical experience and skills in being able to lead CX design programs, but actually I think the leadership aspects, the ability to influence, the ability to present a really solid business case, the commercial acumen required to make a significant impact. This being the impact room on organizations is much more about that these days than it is about having a certificate or being certified in MPS or whatever. Like even a few years ago, that seemed to be the direction everyone was moving in, to qualify themselves as a professional. But yeah, now I think it's actually becoming more T-shaped as leaders, picking up more of those generalist skills, understanding data, digital and technology, being able to hold your own in a conversation with D&T teams because you understand things like technology roadmaps. I think it is becoming a very different animal, the customer experience space more broadly, and therefore we need different animals, leaders, with very different skill sets to be there to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And with AI, everyone talking about that, and I've seen a lot of people posting, with the Sabio Disrupt conference a few weeks ago, people posting, I hope that CX leaders can embrace, this digital revolution, because we are, we're at a crossroads at the moment. We are in a place where it's going to be transformative change, isn't it? Because of this technology that's coming into the world over the next few years. But is CX going to be the leader of that AI and sort of in the conversation, or are they going to be sort of left behind again? Can they do that? I mean, what do you see the opportunities for AI for CX leaders? Do you see that?
Oh God, I think it's a massive distraction. A lot of the conversations that are happening around this, it's far too futuristic. Talking about really like smart automation, generative AI. I think the same thing happened with the metaverse, didn't it? If we'd have listened to the crystal ball holders of 2021, 2022, we were all going to be wearing headsets by now. So I think, to boil it down, we have much greater potential if we can think at a service design level and integrate with digital and technology decision making, but being the guardians of the customer needs and understanding, and probably the employee needs an understanding, or the user needs an understanding, to help to guide and navigate those decisions. For example, I think we saw it a lot in 2020, didn't we, that businesses had to move quickly to things like cloud, and they just made some very technology first decisions that now they're having to spend a lot of money to undo.
Yeah.
So being able to be part of the direction driving in being able to help the business to visualize what are we actually aiming for as our proposition and offer for our customers. Therefore, at a service design level, what does that actually mean? And then at a customer experience design level, being able to support the design of those interactions as well as the decisions, we can deliver a lot greater value. But I don't think CX really has a role to try to lead those things. It's more facilitate those things. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. They think we have to be in control and in charge of the direction, rather than how do we use our very particular set of skills to enable the business to think and behave in a way that creates value for customers, employees, and the business. And we can do that. So yeah, rather than being on what I think are pointless missions of trying to change organizational culture, actually we've got a better chance of changing how the organization behaves by employing things like customer experience design.
Yeah, great perspectives there. Thank you. So as we mentioned earlier, in addition to being a speaker and successful CX consultant and expert yourself, you're also the founder and CEO of the WiCX, the Women in Customer Experience and Technology platform and community. And obviously, I'm also a member and a supporter of that, and I think it's a great place. But what made you decide to do this, and why do you think it's so important, Claire?
think it's kind of the other way around now. I'm the founder and CEO of Women in CX, but also a keynote speaker and consultant. Running a startup definitely has completely shifted my perspective on pretty much everything. So why it started was, as you mentioned, I had this amazing corporate career, worked with some of the biggest brands in, for example, the retail space. And in around 2018, I realised that having worked my whole life to be a senior leader with a big team, a flashy job title in a huge corporate organisation wasn't what I imagined it was going to be. It didn't give me the joy that I imagined when I was 23, 24, doing my master's degree, going on a graduate scheme, that goal was going to give to me. So I went freelance at that point and pioneered this model of customer experience design that basically I spent 15 years in corporate iterating, and was hugely successful straight out of the gate. So much so that I got to fulfill my dream of being a digital nomad and was working with clients in places like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. I came home in, I think it was like February, and I was putting the finishing touches to a book that I was working on that I never actually published in the end. And we all know what happened in March of 2020. The whole world collapsed and travel was banned and we were on lockdown. So I went from having a incredible year ahead with bookings all over the world on pretty much every continent, either as a speaker or as a consultant, doing things like workshops, to nothing. And it felt like my whole world fell apart. So Women in CX really started because during a really difficult time, I started reaching out to women that I'd met on social media and we'd liked each other's posts. And I'd just discovered Zoom, and as I think many of us did at that time.
Well, yeah, for sure.
and just started reaching out for my own need for community and connection. And the conversations that I had were incredible. They were so inspiring. And I just dawned on me, like, the world needs to hear these women. So I decided to, I suppose, use my platform on places like LinkedIn to amplify the voices of other women. And I started a podcast called Inspiring Women in CX. And again, it was like a massive, unexpected success. We ended up with this like community forming around us on social media. And through the podcast, bearing in mind I had no other work to do, I just dedicated my life to publishing the best podcast I possibly could, like each week. That was my job. Someone in Silicon Valley in San Francisco had listened to it and got in touch with me and said, if you had like some investment behind you, what would you do? And I was just like, Jonathan, that was his name, I would build the world's first online membership community for women in customer experience and technology. So they wouldn't have to wait for these episodes. Mm-hmm. We could get them together in like one digital space where they could inspire and support one another, share those stories, share their learning, share their experience with one another. And so the rest is history, really. We built an MVP platform and in literally just 8 weeks, used that money on research and co-design, basically flipped what I used to do for companies to then build in a product and service for what would become my customers or members. And yeah, 8 weeks later, through co-design, we launched to the public and we haven't stopped. So still testing, learning, iterating. I always say to my team, it will never be finished because it won't. Responding to the needs of our members. But since then, we've been able to branch out. So we now offer things like Women in CX Consulting House and have won some major clients with me as the principal, but providing paid freelance opportunities to women from the community. We're now doing media services, so sponsorships and partnerships with big organisations who share our vision for putting women at the centre of those conversations and events. We've got a speaker bureau, so being able to match female speakers to events who come to us organically, actually looking for greater diversity of their speaker lineups, because again, historically it's been very male dominated, especially now we're talking about things like AI and technology and data, getting more women to be central to those conversations. And yeah, we're going to be launching courses actually in September where I'm going to be teaching women over a 12-week period basically everything I know about how to deliver action and change within organizations. through like this cohort learning course where they'll actually be applying their learnings and doing a designing a CX program that they're actually going to be implementing in their own businesses. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, excellent.
But yeah, just like continuing to, I suppose, evolve in line with our values and amplifying the voices of women, unleashing the power of women to lead what we now call the movement for human-centered business. I think to your earlier point, like customer experience probably is like too small of a defining category now. What unites all of us is our desire to make a difference to the world through making business more human-centered in a very myriad of different ways. So yeah, we'll still be women in CX, but now with the strapline, the movement for human-centered business.
Well, as you say, I mean, everything evolves, doesn't it? And the world's evolving around us. And once you achieve one thing, I mean, the platform's growing, you know, exponentially, isn't it? Once you achieve one thing, you move on to something else, don't you? And it's great that you're able and fluid enough, and you know, you're able to sort of move as you need to, really, and embrace these other sort of topics and opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's like practicing what you preach, though, isn't it? So we couldn't be a CX community if we didn't actually do these things. But what's incredible is we've got an audience of over 40,000 people following what's going on for the members that are inside the paid community. And yeah, I just never would have imagined in 3 short years we'd get so much traction. And it's, you know, the outcomes, I suppose, is what matters to me. You know, seeing women getting promotions, pay rises, going for bigger jobs, using their voices, being seen, whether that's on LinkedIn or speaking at events, collaborating together, starting their own businesses, starting their own communities. I'd like to think that we've had something to do with the fact that women are now so much more visible and being, just more audacious in what they do, and getting to be part of that as well, supporting their journeys is an absolute privilege.
Yeah, and I've spoke to quite a few women in the community, and I know how much it's meant to them and how it's helped them, and it's fantastic. Everyone needs a space, and you've built a fantastic space for them to go and to share and to get that support and elevate themselves and their careers, haven't you?
Yeah, but I think I only built it. It's the members that have made it.
Yeah.
So sharing that same set of values, being collaborative, courageous, authentic, inclusive, audacious. The way that women reach out to support one another and actually ask for help, I think that's probably the biggest catalyst. And that everybody is so supportive of one another that you can't manufacture that, you can't design that. That comes down to the people. I suppose to some extent the culture, but the culture is driven by the humans within a group like that. So yeah.
Great stuff. And I recently delivered a webinar for the community, and you asked me a question at the end, which I have thought about a few times since, which is, can one out mindset a systemic bias? So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts a little more on this, as I sort of gave you an answer straight off the bat, but I think it's a very important point to consider, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you want to set the context for like where this came from, like as in the event and what you were talking about, and then I can respond
I mean, I was talking about to the community, helping them, I suppose, with what I thought they could do to rise and thrive and elevate their careers, have a voice in CX, and ultimately, I was very much of the belief that the positive mindset and going in with the right sort of believing in yourself, excuse me, having that confidence, but also obviously that male allyship as well that we need. So I don't know, does that help? And then as I say at the end of it, although we know positive mindset is a really big thing, obviously Claire, you then ask, can one out mindset systemic bias?
So I think what I was responding to was the statistics you shared about the reality of women getting recruited. I can't remember exactly what they were. You might know them off the top of your head, but if there's like one woman in the shortlist of 4,
it's almost zero,
almost guaranteed she will not get the job. Yeah. So I think that was what piqued my question, because I absolutely agree that being positive and relentless is definitely just saying, oh well, it's impossible, so what's the point? Don't give up. Agreed.
Yeah.
But the systemic bias thing, when you said that statistic, is you can't out mindset that. You could go in positive, excited, like sharing your experience, but the statistics are against you, right? Because you're a woman, you're not going to get that job. And I think from my point of view with the community is that I have gained an appreciation of other women's lived experience now by being part of something that maybe I was less aware of until I started to listen to the lived experience of others. So my perspective on bias is more than gender, it's the intersections with our gender. So, for example, we had a panel at Kantar's head office on International Women's Day, and we were talking about, you know, being a woman is only one aspect of gender. There's race bias, sexual orientation, neurodivergence, age. It's something that I know you spoke very passionately about. But also things like body size, our class, our level of education, our accents. Women that were a woman, amazing one called Eva, was from Poland. She's been in the UK for 20 years, but she was talking about some of the stereotypes that she'd experienced by having an accent and how she'd, you know, initially tried really hard to like hide that. And I think for me, it was just maybe challenging the perspective of privilege in bias is a real thing, and we may the further away we are from white, straight, cisgendered, middle-aged, rich, well-educated, good-looking men, the more bias that we're going to face. And yeah, I think for me it was just saying, like, can you outthink that? I don't think that you can. Not saying that you shouldn't be positive, but it's like we're asking women to change rather than the system to change. You know, you be positive, you put yourself out there, you know, all like nice rallying call stuff, but the reality is we're facing more than glass ceilings here. And if anything, with the way politics is at the moment and the influence of what's happening in America, like, it's getting worse. So I think our campaign around International Women's Day this year was really about showing, you know, we talked about imposter syndrome, but how much of that actually is generated by us not being included in the workplace or other places. And as I said, not just as women, but when you think about all of those intersections, like, and systemic and unconscious bias, there's a bigger fight, I think, in challenging and calling that stuff out. So that was where I was coming from. But what I did think after I challenged asked that question and we had that conversation, it also stayed in my mind as well. So it was definitely an impactful moment, because in the panel we talked about like how much of this stuff we do internalize, and as women, I think this was your point really, was that if we start to believe those things that we're told about ourselves, that actually we're participating in continuing the systemic bias, but from the inside of ourselves. So yeah, it's quite a deep existential topic really, but one that we're determined to keep on talking about, not just once a year in March, but 24/7, 365.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some so many great points, and you know, we could talk and talk, couldn't we? But as you say, I think it's just from an educational perspective. And if and in the point that you make, and again, it doesn't matter all the elements, you know, for underrepresented groups, as you say, there are so many of them that need to be championed. But ultimately, as well, we need to believe that everyone is an individual, isn't it? And you know, we're not all women. You know, I'm not the same as you just because we're a woman. You know, isn't it? And so you start to get, I don't know, with education, I mean, we've seen some backlash already around the menopause conversation, and how some women now who go through menopause pretty easily, you know, they don't have any issues, but they feel there's this stigma attached now that they're at this age and everyone knows about menopause and, oh, you're going to have this. So, you know, we did, as you say, there's so many points and issues we have to keep just talking about. But I believe for us, we have to be the champions, but equally it is the world around us that does have to change and has to realize and recognize. And the reality is, for everything else, the demographics are changing, right?
Yeah, older population.
So, yeah, exactly. You know, the world is changing. We have to, because whilst people, if they do tend to recruit, from that place, you know, where we say, you know, middle-aged white male, etc., etc.
It's going to be more of them.
There are less of those. So the talent pool, they're not picking the brightest and the best, because that pool is shrinking. So if they want the brightest and the best, they have to open up the pool, because the pool isn't there anymore. So, you know, some I don't know if you've got anything else you wanted to add on that, but some great points you made.
Yeah, I suppose it's just like, just because you don't experience it yourself doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And for men with conversations around gender, or women with conversations around menopause, like, I think it's just being able to take that step back and just appreciate that your lived experience isn't all that there is. And I think if everybody could do a little bit more of that, then the world would be a lot better, kinder, and more understanding and supportive place.
Yeah, absolutely. So given that all the business employers, CX, women in CX and tech voices you've had the opportunity to hear from, I mean, what would you give 3 top tips, you know, for a business that are struggling with whether it be CX, let's say diversity even, you know, who is looking to and a leader, a CX leader who is looking to progress their career? What would you say?
So I'm going to give an interesting perspective on this that's going to sound very counterintuitive. So to the CX leader, I would say start with the business, not the customer. And I say that because I think in my own experience, and witnessing the experience of now hundreds of women all going through the same thing, is that you've got to understand the organization, its strategy, its goals, its objectives, in order for you to be able to figure out the gaps and how you can help to address them and present a case to the business for change. And a lot of people are still just going in with their dimension. So because it's right for the customer or the employee, we need to create change. And that's just not enough when you're talking to CFOs, CEOs and COOs. And conversely, I'd say to the business, start with the customer, which, as I said, sounds completely opposing views. And I think there's a connection between those two things. So leaders of customer-oriented subjects, whether it's customer experience, UX, marketing, whatever, you know, being able to make that change within themselves to understand and work with the business, they've got a much better chance of supporting the business to become more customer oriented. Not saying 100% customer centric, because that's not right for everybody. And I think those two things are definitely interconnected. And, you know, of all the skills that we need as leaders, it's the ability to engage stakeholders and influence. So that would be, I suppose, not that they were really 3 tips, but
no, those are fantastic. Thank you. And is there anything else that you would like to share?
Well, I'd be missing an opportunity if I didn't say any women listening to come and find out more about the women in CX community, because there's room at our table for everybody. That would be the end. And just thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to share my musings.
Not at all. It's been lovely to have you on, and as I say, I mean, we could sit here and be talking, but
all day,
I'd say all day and for many days, I'm sure. So we, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there that people can get into in a lot more detail, and you know, I'll pop on how they can connect and contact you and the community, etc., so people can contact you if they are interested to do so. So it's been really really enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.